So as we're working with this, we're working with anger and outrage. And the reason that I wanted to bring outrage into it is there's two. One is the outrage that we feel as children when there's some kind of transgression. And another is the outrage that we feel in our culture as a society when we look at injustice. So we're going to work with both of those today. So I wanted to just review, and we've talked a little bit about this. We talk about this a lot, but that neuroception is our perception of threat, and that our detection of threat is involuntary. It's based on our body and our nervous system. So we might notice it if we start to sweat, or we have muscle tension, we have changes in our heart rate. Those are the things that might indicate to us that we're experiencing a level of threat that we weren't before. So that's something that's important to recall and to remember, is that this is involuntary. And the next part of it is that we have things that we can do. And so sometimes with anger, it's good to do something a little bit more active, because oftentimes energy is quite stirred up, and we're not kind of naturally going to relax and do those long breaths and all of those things. So something that's more engaging. So one thing that I sometimes do is put your hands in a fist and put them up above your head. And then when you exhale, throw the energy and take your hands, let them kind of throw the energy down out of your body. That can be helpful. Shaking it out. We do some shaking and dancing here. Something that's a little bit more vigorous can help to move that energy and to help us come back to a more regulated state, when maybe then we could do some breathing or some relaxation, something like that. So one thing that we can do, and that I had for quite a while on my phone, was in the notes feature. I just had some things that would remind me. So, go stand outside and take a few breaths, or do the throwing it down out of my hands, or shaking it, or so you could remind yourself with notes or something like that, or just as soon as you start to feel that you're getting a little bit too activated, then take a step back and do something to regulate again, and then come back. And especially with this, because you can always listen to the recording. You don't have to do it all right now. So this girl looks pretty angry. Alice Miller is a psychiatrist who's done a groundbreaking work 20, 30 years ago about family dynamics and rage and anger. And this is something that's a little bit more commonly known now, is that we need to maintain our connection with our parents or adults in order to survive. So our nervous system always kicks in first, and our nervous system wants connection, and it wants the protection of a group. And so if we express our anger and rage, even looking at that face, you might be going like, well, that's not someone I really want to spend time with. It can be a way of kind of pulling back. A parent can pull back, or we can just feel like, why are they so mad? And then it makes us mad. And there's all kinds of reactions that we have. So if that little girl could express what she's feeling in a way that led to more connection, then it would probably go a little bit better for her. But that's not something that we control, especially as children. So one of the things about having a well-regulated adult is that we can express these, we can feel what we feel, and that we're guided in terms of maintaining a connection with ourselves and with the other people around us. And when Pete Walker talks about arrested self-protection stifles our healthy anger, that's exactly what we've been talking about, is that if we're abused in some way and we're scared, then we're going to have this feeling of something's wrong and I need to protect myself. We're all born with our nervous system and our primitive brain wanting to protect ourselves. But in a lot of situations of emotional or physical or other kinds of abuse, that system breaks, and we feel like we can't really afford to protect ourselves. And one of the things that we know about the nervous system is that we'll always do the best that we can. And sometimes it doesn't look like it's the best. So we might really shut down, or we might be really angry, or we might do all kinds of different things that could that could lead us to protecting ourselves in some way, but that it's not really voluntary, especially as a child. We don't have the brain development even to do that. So it's the arrested self-protection concept that I wanted to really bring forward here, is that we have this natural drive to protect ourselves. And what is it that could get in the way of that? And then the connection that that has with stifling our healthy anger. So if we feel like we're not worthy of protecting because we're horrible, we're broken, there's something really inherently wrong with us, and children often do that. And again, that's in order to protect the relationship with our adult. Then it sets up this whole condition that happens throughout our childhood and our adult life. So if we can't express ourselves, this anger can just kind of smolder. We get into the resentfulness, the self-hatred. We talk about cynicism, and sometimes it flares up, and then we act out in some hostile way, and that usually isn't a benefit. It helps in the moment. It just kind of takes off some of the steam in the moment, but it often is more disconnecting. So again, Pete Walker's book, The Tao of Fully Feeling, is a really good resource for that. And one of the things he talks about is that angering, as he calls it, which is expressing anger, feeling it and expressing it, releases the accumulation of unexpressed hostile feelings about parental injustice. So let's just sit with that for a moment. And if we're a parent, we might be moving into shaming or guilt or something. See if you could resist that. But just as we're growing up, life isn't fair. Our parents aren't always fair. And we have this accumulated feeling of injustice. And if we're not allowed to express that or to feel it, then where does it go? We suppress it. It just kind of continues to build. And then we live in this world where we bring our nervous systems and our fight, flight, freeze, our suppressed anger into our culture, into our society. And we have all of this systemic oppression of women, racial injustice, of climate, of all of these isms, of all of these oppressions. And it can be really difficult to have that bigger view. So for me, I've always, since I was in my 20s, I've been an activist in some way or another. And one of the things that I kind of burned out on in the women's movement after several years of just being angry at the oppression was it felt like it didn't really focus on what were we fighting for? What kind of a world do I want to live in? And so how can we enjoy our life and heal and manage all of this at the same time? And we're really seeing that breakdown and the effect of that breakdown, especially in the United States right now, but really all over the world with the rise of fascism. And we're also really seeing this profound disconnection from ourselves and from each other and the dehumanizing. So that all comes into the mix in terms of we have our own personal experience in our own body and our own with ourselves and in our own personal relationships. And then we bring that out into the world with other people as well. And some of it is conditioning. We're conditioned in a certain way. Some of it is we feel like we're an outsider. Now, Audre Lorde has written a lot on anger. If anyone wants to look more into anger, she's a really good resource on that. A lot of that's online. And we all find ways to handle things. So some of us express ourselves like Jaden Smith in the corner there of being more gender fluid and not living by the rules that are kind of set out for men. And some of us go into politics or into the Supreme Court like Ruth Bader Ginsburg. But how do we live with this feeling of injustice? Especially for, one of the things that's really kind of always been present in my life too is living in a rape culture. And whether you're a man who's fighting, like my son is really working hard to educate and bring up his boys to be aware of that and to fight against that and to not dehumanize women, which is really what that is. And how can you continue to do that and still kind of have a healthy expression of who we are? A lot of the injustices is that we feel like we can't really be who we are. If we really express who we are, we're going to be shunned or isolated. And so then that comes into the mix too. And how can we work with that? So Valerie Carr is a woman who's right now has the People's Inauguration. It's a 10-day kind of experience through Sounds True, if anyone's interested in signing up for that. But she really talks about rage as the biological force that protects that which is loved. And that women and girls are often taught to suppress their rage, and men and boys are taught to let it explode. And that it's a sign of strength if they do that. And she talks in her book about her mother standing up for her very strongly after she revealed that she'd been sexually abused by someone in the family. And that she hadn't really, until that moment, been aware of how strong that rage could be as a protective kind of field for her as her mother protected her in the family. And as I was, listening to her talk about that in the interview with Tammy Simon, she talked about how that enabled her to really stand up for herself. And a lot of us have that feeling of, gosh, I wish somebody had done that for me. I wish I'd had a mother that noticed, or a parent of any kind that noticed what was going on with me and that noticed how hurt I was and that would rage on my behalf and say, no, that's wrong, and would have helped me with that. So that's one of the things that I was really taken with. And she's a woman who has been able to work with that and kind of move out into the world and help other people. And part of that is because she had a mother who stood up for her. And a lot of us have parents who didn't, for whatever reasons. A lot of it has to do with inherited family trauma, intergenerational trauma, that our parents didn't have the power to express themselves and certainly not to protect us often. And then we have that grief of having to kind of have that as our life experience, that nobody did that. And one of the things that we know is that we can start to do that for ourselves. And that's a really, that's a real counter to the oppression. So one of the things that I wanted to bring forward too is that in this culture that we live in, we've lost a lot of our rituals around releasing grief and anger. And right now with COVID, especially, we've lost the ability to get together if someone dies, which is a much more common experience now with COVID, that people aren't allowed to go to the hospital. They're not allowed to be with their families or with people that they love. They can't travel to be with them. And then we can't get together as a group of people who care either, and to process our grief. So we've had a lot of really challenging situations, especially this last year. But I would say it's been going on for a long time, of people being disconnected. And even if we can get together, that we're often still, there's a barrier there to being real and authentic with people and to feeling like it's okay for us to do that. So Marley Liss has a lot of resources online. I was just really taken by this poem. This is just a small little bit about this blog about conscious anger, and that anger can free us from being frozen, but also it can be a real force to help us to shake us up and to shake us awake and to bring ourselves to a place of safety where we can get into feeling it and releasing it and letting it move through and reconnecting with ourselves. So let's do some inquiry. So I want to go back to this quote of Pete Walker's: "Arrested self-protection stifles our healthy anger." We'll take a few minutes to do this. I am an adult. Can I afford to see this clearly now? And can I afford to be on my own side and protect myself? So get kind of steady in your body. Notice your feet, your seat, your breath. Notice you might have a reaction to that face, that angry scowl, but continue to breathe and be connected with yourself in this moment. And just notice, what's your response to that? Could I afford now to be on my own side and protect myself? And remembering that we can move kind of in, we can move back. And sometimes it is very helpful to just allow yourself to feel into, or to see if you can connect with the person who is younger, who couldn't protect themselves. And just in a sense of having compassion and connection, can you stay connected with yourself at that younger age? Arrested self protection stifles our healthy anger. One of the ways that this works too is that sometimes we'll back away and not protect ourselves, and we'll have that turning against ourselves. And that, just to remember, that's a survival strategy that probably was the best that could have been as a child. We might not need that anymore, but that this is a hard thing to work with when our nervous system says there's some danger here. And we have this kind of automatic conditioning that comes in. So to acknowledge that with a little bit of perspective on, that's how the nervous system works. It's not like there's something wrong with us. It's just the nervous system responses that we're working with. And then let's go into the conditioning. So we'll take a little bit longer with this too, probably almost 10 minutes. So it might help to look at your conditioned beliefs. It happened a long time ago. It won't help to get angry about it now. That's one of the ways that we work, go into freeze. Well, there's no point being mad. Or if you have more of a explosive anger, I can't help it. It just explodes out of me. And then often the deep regret, we feel like I regret hurting them, but they won't accept my apology. And then we get, we feel isolated. So, what are some of your conditioned beliefs? That it wasn't safe to express anger would be another one. That if I ever expressed how angry I was, I'd be in trouble. I would get the silent treatment for 2 weeks. There's all kinds of experiences that we have that lead to our beliefs. So sometimes we work with this as though the beliefs are on one side and then freedom's on the other side. So, what would freedom be? To me, freedom is emotional expression, being able to feel our feelings, being in our body, and knowing from our direct experience that they release. So, whether it's sadness or grief or anger or outrage, we need to be able to feel it and not shame ourselves for having the feeling. So, what's sticky in between those two? So, it's our conditioning, most of it from when we're a child, but also as an adult, that it's not safe to feel it or there's no point in feeling it. we're going to get in worse trouble. So some of the inquiry sentences are, or pick one. And so these are reverse inquiries where we say something we know it isn't true completely, and then we see what comes up as the rebuttal. So I confidently and safely express anger and set clear boundaries. Does it feel true? Not so much. I feel comfortable. I don't try to suppress the anger. Or maybe for you it's more that suppressed self-protection. And what would it be like to fiercely protect yourself and people you love? I fiercely protect myself and others. And with all of that, stay in your body, stay with your breath. Stay in this present moment, especially when we're doing conditioned beliefs. It can kind of drag us back into the past. So if that's going on, stay grounded, open your eyes, look around, name 5 things you can see, hold your own hand, stay connected with yourself in this moment. There's no right or wrong way to do this. Let your attention go where it's drawn. Might be to feel the heat of an anger in your body somewhere. Notice what are the thoughts that come in. With inquiry, we're really just looking what's here? How am I experiencing that in my body? And if you find that you're off on a rant or that you're getting distressed, bring yourself back. Stay in your body, stay with your breath, with the feeling in your body. Open your eyes if you need to. Stay present with yourself. We still have another couple of minutes. So if you've wandered off someplace else in your mind, bring yourself back. Or maybe you want to stand up and shake. Feel your whole body, just kind of shake that energy up, let it move. Notice the patterns of thought in your mind. If you're ruminating or getting really kind of stuck in something, see if you could bring your attention back. Tap on your forehead, let your attention come into the sound and sensation of the tapping. Open your eyes, put an image on the other wall. If you're working with sensation in your body, notice where it is. Notice the outside edges. If it has an image, you could look at that. If it's hot or cold, or if it feels threatening. Is it moving? Is it still? Does it have a color? What does your heart know? What's going on emotionally? And then wrapping up the inquiry over the next minute or so. And we'll come back together. If you wanted to make a mental note or jot down something you want to go into a little bit more, we don't have time to go deeply into it. And yet, often we have some real insights. And when you're ready, come back to the group.